Well, good morning and welcome to City Hall. We're going to get started with the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. Jason Gaddis is here. He's a pastor at Southwest Baptist Church. He's going to lead us in the invocation. Afterwards, I'll ask Councilman Greenwell if he'll lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Would everyone please stand?
All right, let's pray. Father, we thank you for this another day, and we're thankful for our city. I want to thank you for the leaders of our city, and Lord, what will take place here today. We are acknowledging that we need your wisdom and your strength and help, dear God, in every way. Pray for the workers of our city and those that are teaching and taking care of things, Lord. I think about the priorities of our city, and we're grateful for what is going on. And we pray for your continued blessings. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Please face the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Every month, the Oklahoma City Public Schools Foundation and the Oklahoma City Rotary Club help us honor one teacher in Oklahoma City as our Teacher of the Month, and Samantha Murch is this month's winner. Samantha, will you come forward? Let's show our appreciation and acknowledgement of Samantha. Congratulations. Let's have the clerk read the resolution, and then we'll talk a little bit.
Whereas Samantha Murch has been named Teacher of the Month for August 2015 by the Foundation for Oklahoma City Public Schools and the Rotary Club of Oklahoma City. Whereas Samantha has been teaching for 5 years, 4 of which have been at Star Spencer High School. Samantha received her bachelor's degree in Psychology and Communication Theater from the Western State College of Colorado and her master's degree in Educational Leadership from Colorado State University. Whereas Samantha was recognized as the 2015 Oklahoma City Public Schools Teacher of the Year. Whereas dedicated to revitalizing the fine arts at Oklahoma City Public Schools, Samantha produced 18 play productions and events in her 4 years with the district. Whereas Samantha created the first ever boys soccer program in Star Spencer High School history, coaching the team for 3 years. Samantha has been active in the professional development of educators as the Fine Arts Department Chair, as well as a member of the Leadership and Data Analysis Team and the Technology Committee at Star Spencer High School. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Mayor and Council of the City of Oklahoma City that they do hereby recognize and commend Samantha Murch on her selection as August 2015 Teacher of the Month by the Foundation for Oklahoma City Public Schools and the Rotary Club of Oklahoma City.
And Sam, the attention now goes to the board to see if we can pass this resolution. So I'll need a motion and a second, and she's crossing her fingers, and it passes unanimously. Let's show our appreciation again for Samantha. And this is, when I got to talking with her in my office this morning, realized what a traumatic summer she's had. She has had a baby that came a little bit early, and she's had a husband graduate from our police academy, and now she's Teacher of the Month. And so this has been, the summer of 2015 is when she's never going to forget. But congratulations, and drama teachers are so important in bringing out the best of our young students. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate this. It's a privilege to get to be here today and to be honored like this, especially with some of the things my family has experienced this summer. It's important to us, but I know that this will be important to my school as well. Teaching high school students, period, and then teaching high school students in an at-risk school, you don't get a lot of traditional appreciation conventionally like this. So this is a big deal, and I know that it will be a big deal for my school too. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Congratulations. We're on item 3B of the council agenda. I'll look for a motion on the series of appointments. All right, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 4 is the Journal of Council Proceedings. 4A is to receive the journal for August 4th, and 4B is to approve the journal for July 21st. All right, comments or questions on the journal? Cast your votes. It passes unanimously. And item 5 is request for uncontested continuances.
Mayor, outside of the two listed on the docket, items 9A and 9B, on page 6, we'd ask that item 7N be stricken. We'll bring it back. There are some errors on the date, so we'd like to strike item 7N on page 6. And then moving to page 19, under item 9F1, item C, 5830 Eagleston Avenue, we ask that that be stricken. We need to re-notify. Item D, 841 Ethan Lane, we ask that that be stricken. It's now occupied. Item G, 125 Henderson Drive, we ask that that be stricken. The owner has secured. Item L, 3805 Northwest 13th Street, we ask that that be stricken. It's now occupied. Item O, 500 Southeast 50th Street, we ask that that be stricken. We need to re-notify for dilapidated. Item P, 429 Southeast 55th, we ask that that be stricken. The owner has secured. Item R, 1009 Southwest 128th Street, we ask that that be stricken. The owner has secured. And then moving on to item 9G1C, 5830 Eagleston Avenue, we need to strike that. It's we need to re-notify. Item K, 3805 Northwest 13th Street, we ask that that be stricken. It's now occupied. Item N, 500 Southeast 50th Street, we ask that that be stricken. We need to re-notify for dilapidated. Item O, 429 Southeast 55th Street, we ask that that be stricken. The owner has secured. And finally, P, 1009 Southwest 128th Street, we ask that that be stricken. The owner has secured.
Any other requests for uncontested continuances? All right, we'll move on to item 6. It's revocable permits. The first is a request with One Healthy BOD, which is a USA Track and Field sanctioned event to hold the Sizzlin' 6K run. Is there anyone here representing this event today? All right, it's in Ward 6 and 7. I'll look for a motion in a second from that end of the council. All right, cast your votes on item 6A. It passes unanimously. Another right-of-way permit request is coming to us from Rebuilding Together Oklahoma City, and they're having the Rebuilding Together Construction Derby, and it looks like Rick Johnson is here. Rick, come on up. Tell us about this event and how we can be a part of it.
Morning, everyone. Thank you for seeing us today. A little bit about Rebuilding Together Oklahoma City. It's a nonprofit specializing in home repairs for low-income seniors. The tagline is keeping low-income seniors warm, safe, and dry. We pair volunteers with needy seniors who cannot afford, nor most of the time they are disabled or have health problems and can't maintain their own home. So it's either they live in dilapidated conditions, or they're moved to assisted living kind of thing. So it's an important mission. We touch about 250, 300 homes a year. We have an annual event called Rebuilding Today that was in Meg Salyer's district. We did a block build in 10 Penn, which was a new thing for us and quite successful. So the Construction Derby is one of our major fundraisers. It's held we close 5th Street. It's a non-motorized soapbox derby for adults. It's a lot of fun. We have about 32 cars that race. It's a team event. There's a push start, and they roll down the hill, and somebody catches them at the bottom. So this is our 12th year. It's been a major fundraiser for us, and we'd like to do it again this year.
That's a really, really fun event, and great hamburgers cooking outside. So I really encourage everybody to come down. Mayor, I'd move approval.
All right, is there a second on 7B? Second. 6B? All right, cast your votes. And that permit is extended. Thanks, Rick.
Thank you.
And then item 6C is a revocable right-of-way permit with Rick Vick doing business as Galley Soul Food to hold the Eats on 8th and Harvey. And Rick, come on up. Tell us about this event.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah.
Rick Vick, 2833 Edmond, 73013. Eats on 8th. I'd like to talk about it real briefly. Eats on 8th is going to bring a variety of dishes, first and foremost. We're also going to have local restaurants participating. We kind of put a feeler out to see who was interested, and we found actually a downtown local restaurant who would like to participate. So we have local restaurants that are going to be participating. We also have local food trucks. Some of the local food trucks that have been operating here in Oklahoma City that have an opportunity to participate, they've expressed interest. We feel like we have a diverse group. We have individuals that are participating that are veteran-owned. We also have a couple individuals who express interest that are women-owned businesses. We also are fortunate that everyone who has expressed interest on Eats on 8th, they're all Oklahoma-owned businesses. We've been fortunate. We reached out to a small business for a little help because there is cost in putting a special event together. So we reached out to CNC Commercial Cleaning out of Stillwater, small business, SBA Small Business of the Year company, and they said, absolutely, we will help you for your traffic control needs, porta potty needs. So they're standing by to help. We also will have inflatables, family-friendly event. We've lined up, upon approval, we've lined up a dunk tank. We're going to have a Bedlam dunk tank. So there'll be an OSU or OU person sitting in the dunk tank for fun. Food trucks. We'd like the city to consider us. Thank you. We really appreciate Oklahoma City Special Events. They've been seamless in guiding us through. It's our first event. So they really have kind of hand-carried us through the process. So just seamless cooperation for special events. We look forward to working with them in the future. We'd like to thank the mayor, city manager, and all the wards for the consideration.
All right. Meg, this is in Ward 6.
It is, and Rick, I just wanted to be really clear. Are you charging a fee to your food trucks, or the folks that are participating?
Yes, ma'am. Initially, on the initial round for the food trucks, we are charging a fee, and part of the fee that we are charging food truck is to cover the cost that our sponsor could not cover.
Okay.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
you plan to have porta potties and barricades and security and traffic control and all those things that are required?
Yes, ma'am. We have followed the blueprint of special events. We have contacted Oklahoma City Police Department, Special Events Police Department. We have lined them up with Sergeant Johnson. We've also followed their blueprint, and we've contacted Action Safety for the traffic control plan.
Great.
We've also followed the additional blueprint, and we've contacted Waste Connections for our trash disposal, and we actually have a royal flush on our porta potties that are coming in.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Meg, could I ask a question? This seems like a strong parallel to a situation we had in Ward 2, where we have the Paseo Arts Festival, and they had, for a couple of decades, they had their festival, and then another individual decided that they wanted to piggyback on top of that festival and have kind of their own mini festival within that festival. And legally, I think they had the right, and they had good arguments, but there was so much conflict for years. I mean, my predecessor, Sam Bowman, really just was literally tortured. And our city staff, just an exorbitant amount of time of our city staff being distracted by the conflict between the two groups. And so I'm hoping that maybe we could learn from that situation and avoid it here. I mean, I've heard you talk about the different groups that you're going to work with, but not necessarily working with the H and 8th group. Right. It's been their efforts that's got, the bulk of the people that'll be there because they're advertising and their work to date. So, you'll benefit from that, but I just hope that there's somebody in that organization that you can connect with, and that really the lines of communication can be maximized, and maybe the city staff can be only a last resort, that we're drawn into if there's any disagreement, that you really can work it out amongst yourselves and not draw the city staff in the way that we were drawn into the Paseo Arts Festival. It was everybody's very, very busy. That was just a huge amount of emotional and time and money drain.
Right. Well, thank you, and that is very important. And we have reached out, and we have heard some positive things from the H&A Association. From fellow food truck operators, they were told that if they did not make it into the opportunity for H&A, they were saying that there would be a possibility of another event. So behind the scenes, we're trying to work together to not have any conflicts.
Thank you.
I think Ed's comments are well taken, and I want to recognize Laura Massenot, who's here today. I think it speaks volumes that she's here, they've spent a lot of time, energy, and sponsor money making a very important event in downtown Oklahoma City. And so cooperation and recognizing all of those efforts, I think, are going to be very important.
Yes, ma'am. We recognize and we have deep respect for what H&H has done.
It's not our job to get into squabbles here. It's our job to make sure that everybody that applies for a permit is following all the requirements and meeting all the criteria that we have set, and it sounds as if you've done that. So thank you, Drew, for working on this, and given all of that, I would move approval.
All right, cast your votes. Passed unanimously.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. All right, we'll recess the council meeting, convene as the Oklahoma City Municipal Facilities Authority. There are 6 items. Is there a motion on the MFA? Move the items. All right, cast your votes. Passed unanimously. We'll adjourn the OC MFA, convene as the Oklahoma City Public Property Authority. 4 items. All right, comments or questions on the PPA? Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. We'll adjourn the OCPPA, convene as the Oklahoma City Environmental Assistance Trust. Just 1 item. Move the item. Okay, is there a second? Cast your votes. It passed unanimously. We'll adjourn the OCEAT and reconvene the council meeting with the consent docket.
Move the item subject to individual consideration.
All right. Any individual considerations?
Mayor, I have 2 things this morning, 7N and 7P.
Okay.
Did she say Q?
No, she said N and T. N and P, okay.
Then Q, please.
Q, okay. Meg, why don't you go ahead and get started?
Sure. Both are very brief, but I just wanted to mention that item N is the call to artists for the interior of our new courts administration building. And so once again, as a public project, this building falls under the city's 1% for art ordinance, and so the selection process is expected to be completed by January of 16, and so I would encourage anybody would like to respond to that call for artists.
How is a decision made whether the artist to be inside the building or not? I
Before
don't
we
care.
get too far down the road, this item's been struck from the agenda.
Oh, okay.
What was your question?
Well, the question is, how's the decision made between whether the art is inside the building or outside the building?
In the police department, they did both. They did some in and some outside, in some outside. I think staff works with the architect.
There's no hard and fast rules, just...
No.
Okay. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think staff works with the architect.
Okay. And then P?
And then P is our professional services agreement with the Neighborhood Alliance. And I just always want to take the opportunity, here comes Georgie now, I just wanted to recognize the work that the Neighborhood Alliance is doing. Georgie and her team have been a tremendous help with the efforts to help solve some panhandling issues that we have throughout the city. It's been extremely successful, and we reached out to the Neighborhood Alliance to ask to help coordinate the business meetings, and they've done an excellent job. And in the work that Pete and I have been doing in South Oklahoma City on the 29th Street bid, Anna's been at all of those meetings, and she's doing a great outreach job as well. And so thank you for all you do, Georgie.
All right. And then Ed, you want to speak on Q?
Oh, I just asked, draw the council's attention to item Q, which is the $121,000 that we spend on social services, and these are the 12 organizations. And we have so much needs in terms of poverty, addiction, public health, and we have set the amount that we're spending on social services at $121,000, I think, for a number of years. I mean, we're not increasing it for inflation. We're not increasing it for the size of the growth of the sales tax or the city. And I just respectfully ask the council to consider increasing the allotment. I mean, we spend so much on public safety. We talk about the jail and drug addiction and stuff like that, but really this $10,000 for Metro Alliance is really just about the the bulk of our investment. I think it really is, you could look at it as a public safety investment or a public health, but I just ask that we consider maybe increasing this at least with the, commensurate with the growth of the city's sales tax. Thanks.
Councilman, I'd be happy to do that. We can put that into next year's budget. I do want to point out that we do have other contracts with the Homeless Alliance and other things beyond that, but your point's well taken.
Federal pass-through funds and
No,
things
not
like
all.
that.
Well,
Yeah.
in addition to that, I think perhaps we, especially in next budget year, ought to look at the whole idea that with the state retreating from funding these kind of things, are we going to fill the gap, or are we going to try to fill the gap, or are we going to follow suit ourselves? Because by funding this at the same level year after year after year, we're actually reducing our and I think it's obvious, especially in the substance abuse area and the whole mental health area, the state is just retreating every year from supporting those kind of services. We recognize, and the burden of that really falls much more on us than it does on them, because when the streets are filled with people that ought to be receiving mental health help and that aren't, the jail's full, and many of those people are there because of their lack of ability to get mental health services, and then we all pay for that. So I think it would just be well that when we do our budget next year that we at least address that we make a decision whether we're going to keep doing what we're doing, or we're going to follow suit with what they're doing, or we're going to do more.
Pete, I appreciate your comments on that. I'm going to just take a little bit different view. I'm afraid that the more we assume the state's responsibilities, the more they're going to begin to look for us. It's like...
You think it could get worse, actually?
Oh, I think so. And if they see the city stepping forward and assuming the state's responsibility, given their potential budget problem for next year, I just think they'll begin putting more and more responsibility back on us and taking away our ability to manage, for instance, the city's operations, as far as ordinance and things like that. I'm just raising that concern.
Well, I don't see how it could get any worse. I mean, I don't see how we could be in a situation with regard to our relationship to the legislature in that regard could be worse. I don't see how they could, other than you shut down mental health altogether. I mean, the idea that you can save money by reducing mental health services and not taking into consideration the impact that has on public health, on crime, on the cost of policing, how could it be worse than that? I mean, and the fact is, even if they do that, is our position going to be, well, that's just tough, we're not going to do anything else about it? We're just going to let that fall into the hole?
No, but I do recommend that we have a serious dialogue with the state legislature about this, that let's identify their areas of responsibilities and make sure they're assuming that responsibility and funding it properly, instead of just automatically, whenever they retreat, fill that void.
I'd like to be a fly on the wall for those discussions.
Well, I'd like for us to be a part of that discussion. That's what I'm recommending, that instead of just automatically filling the void that they create, let's have some serious dialogue with them.
Ed, did you want to say something?
I might, just another angle, I'm not sure. A private citizen could donate to this fund, right, and it would be tax deductible? A private citizen could donate to this fund and it would be tax deductible?
To the city, they could make a donation to the city, yes. It would be.
I might just
I'm not a tax lawyer, but
I think
I'm pretty sure it's tax deductible.
Well, I know you could make a tax-deductible donation to the city, and then I guess we could put it into that fund. I mean, that might be an idea for those watching who give at the end of the year. I mean, this would be a tax-deductible. We have city staff that goes through all these organizations, so you would know that the organizations we give to are doing good work, and 100% of your donation would go to the organization because the overhead's already paid for. So that's just another angle and thought.
I think they could give directly to all those organizations too, right? If there's...
These were, yeah.
Yeah, these are all 501c3
Yeah.
organizations that would accept charitable contributions as
But
well.
if you wanted to give a basket to 12 different organizations, you could do it that way.
All right, ready to vote the consent docket?
Mayor, could I ask a quick question? Could you pull 7F, 7R for me and vote on that separately?
Sure, F and R,
Yep, just R.
just R. All right, so I'll take the current motion to exclude item R, and so we'll vote on the docket without R. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Is there a motion to vote on item R separately? All right. Cast your votes on item R, and it passed unanimously. All right, on to the concurrence docket. Is there a motion? All right, we have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions individually on any item on the concurrence docket? All right, cast your votes. It passed unanimously. That moves us on to item 9, which begins a series of items that require a separate vote. At the beginning of the meeting, the first two items were deferred. Item 9A has been deferred until September 1st, and item 9B has been deferred until September 1st. Item 9C is a public hearing today. As most of our citizens know, the state legislature has passed laws regarding texting while driving, and our city is now trying to get in line with those regulations. And we've called a public hearing today where citizens can come speak on the issue. Is there anyone here hoping to speak on the public hearing aspect of item 9C? Yeah, well, come on forward then. Good morning. We will need your name and address for the record.
Thank you. My name is David Brook. I live at 7301 North Sooner Road in Oklahoma City. I'm here opposing this texting bill. I want to let you know there is a book called The Law by Frederick Bastiat. If you read the opening statement, government is a great fiction by which everyone tries to live at the expense of everyone else. I think you all need to keep that in mind. To all the civilians, when you are pulled over by the police, you only have to give your driver's license, your insurance verification, and your registration. You don't have to answer any questions, and you can protect yourself. There are plenty of good videos on YouTube to watch. The Supreme Court has ruled unanimously that law enforcement needs a search warrant to search your phone. Texting laws are unenforceable. And I don't know who wrote this new texting law, but I expect everyone to vote against it. This is just revenue generating and unnecessary control to government. There are plenty of laws on the books, such as inattentive driving. We don't need any other laws. Who are the texters? Texters, mostly poor people who don't have the money to pay the fine. Are you willing to make the poor even poorer by theft from government who enrich themselves to no end? What will this money be used for? Another public safety program? Typical government waste of money. The state texting law has many problems with it, admitted by those who voted for it. It is basically void for vagueness. You need to understand that if there is no victim, there is no crime. Government is not instituted to be a pre-crime unit, meaning they are not to act before a crime only after one's loss of life, liberty, or property. I educate texters when I see them. I honk my horn. Call horns are safety features that need to be used more. For the record, I don't text while driving. I understand this is an unsafe action. As Roman Senator Tacitus said, as formerly we suffered from crime, now we suffer from laws. I can only gather that if you vote for this ordinance, you promote control, not freedom. Please vote freedom. Thank you.
Thanks for coming down. Anyone else hoping to speak? Yeah, Mark, come on up.
Mark Williams with AT&T. I live at 3037 Stony Brook in Oklahoma City. And I want to commend you for taking up this ordinance. I think it's a very practical thing to do. As you know, the statistics are there, that if you're texting while driving, you're 22 times more likely to be involved in an accident. And that does have victims that are innocent victims. You're 8 times more likely to be in an accident if you're texting than if you're merely drunk. nobody objects to the police pulling drunk drivers off the road. This ordinance will allow you to pull people that are 8 times more likely to cause damage off the road. So I commend you for this, and I encourage you to vote for this ordinance.
All right, thank you. Anyone else hoping to speak in the public hearing aspect of this item today? All right, how about a motion then? All right, item 9C passes unanimously and is being moved forward. I don't see a date on here to be voted on finally. September 1st. Okay, so the council will make a decision on this issue on September 1st. Item 9D is also a public hearing, and this has to do with, again, a state law that requires drivers to signal at least 100 feet prior to a lane change. And in an attempt to draw ourselves in alignment with that law, this item has been brought to the council for approval.
Somebody brought up, is anybody here to talk about this? Somebody brought up an interesting point to me about this one, about it being 100 feet, and he thought that it would be a better solution to make it a timed thing, to where it's like you have to have it for 3 seconds rather than a timed. That way, if you're stopped or if you're going really slow and you put your blinker on, it's more of a time thing than a. Do we have to do it because it's a state law?
Yeah,
because
it's already in state law. The question is whether or not we make it a local statute or not. But our police if we didn't do this, as I understand it, then our police would still be expected to enforce it, but they would be enforcing a state law and not a local law.
Okay.
And the fines would be distributed as such.
Okay. It was just an interesting idea that I thought would probably work better, but
I don't disagree with you.
Your Honor, question on that, if we did not pass this and our officer did enforce the state law, would there be a difference of where that ticket would be adjudicated?
Yes, it would have to be a county ticket if they're enforcing a state law. For it to be enforced in municipal court, we have to have an ordinance.
So the easiest way to get this thing resolved is to get the two, the state and the city, in synchronization.
It is.
Thank you.
All right. Do we have a motion then on item 9D? All right. And does anyone show up today to speak on this item? All right. Cast your votes. That item moves forward. Is the final hearing set for September 1st? Okay. September 1st is when the council will vote on that. We're on to item 9E. This is a public hearing regarding dilapidated structures. Is there anyone here hoping to speak under any of the 3 items listed under dilapidated structures? All right, how about a motion then? Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 9F is a public hearing regarding unsecured structures. Is there anyone here hoping to speak under any item listed under 9F? All right, how about a motion? Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. And 9G is a public hearing regarding abandoned buildings. Is there anyone here hoping to speak under any of the items listed under 9G? Cast your votes. It passes unanimously. 9H is a public hearing regarding removal of property from the abandoned building list. We have one piece of property listed. Is anyone here hoping to speak on this item? All right, how about a motion? Cast your votes. It passes unanimously.
Mayor, in regard to that, I would like in the next month or so some kind of a report on the progress of the new program. If it's too soon, Charles, you can tell me it's too soon, we can put it off. But if you've got enough data on how many we've put on this new list and how it's working, I'd just kind of like some feedback on it. If it's premature to ask that, well, you don't have enough data, well, I understand that.
Too many in the beginning stages, but we have enough data we can provide you.
Just some kind of, it doesn't have to make a big deal out of it, but it was kind of controversial when we did it. Obviously, is in response to the cooperation that we get from the state legislature. And I'd just like to see, I couldn't resist that. And David didn't even hear me. I'm sorry. But anyway, if it, again, I don't want it to be an undue burden in terms of time, but if there's enough data to talk about it, well, I'd like to see it.
Okay.
We can give you something what we got. It might be not as complete as we'd like to
Okay.
have later, but we'll get something.
Okay.
Jim, would you like to make a comment? There is I don't know if everybody remembers, there is a coalition that is looking at this whole situation, comprised of people outside of city government, led by the planning department. Georgie, I see back there, she's attended several of the meetings. The head of the real estate operation, Kells, has attended several of the meetings. Would it be appropriate to give a brief review of what's going on in that, or?
Sure, we can bring that forward. I'd be happy to.
That's a good idea. All right, we're on to item 9I, and this is a resolution that would approve a petition in the pursuit of setting up a new business improvement district for the Adventure District in Ward 7. Deborah, come on forward. You're the point person on this item. What can you tell us today?
Good morning. Thank you for allowing us to be here. We want to talk to you just briefly, and we have a slide presentation to show you about the Adventure District. We've spent a great deal of time working on this the last couple of years in trying to bring forward a lot of plans. We all know about everything that's out there, and I'll remind you here in just a moment. But we think it's a great opportunity in light of the article that was in the paper this morning, Councilman, about all the great things happening, and we might say finally happening in Northeast Oklahoma City through some great work of Councilman Pettis and others, to be an anchor to the north end of all of that. And so with this, I think we're finally ready to go, and we'll move forward. The Adventure District, if we go to the second one, Tiffany. Just as a reminder, sits at the intersection of two major highways, and these are 2010 figures, but I-35 has 95,000 cars a day, and I-44 has 55,000, so it is a major area for us that we were trying to capture. It also, next please, as you'll recall, has 5 major tourism draws: the softball stadium, Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum, the zoo, Remington Park, and the Science Museum. Also, it has other things that we sometimes forget about: the 45th Infantry Museum, Firefighters Museum, the Lincoln Park golf courses, and that amazing new clubhouse that you all have put together there and built, the Metrotech Spring Lake campus. A really big and growing area is the Northwest Regional Health and Wellness Center. The Tinseltown movie theaters themselves draw 1 million people a year. And then Twin Fountains RV Park is a major asset to all of our tourism efforts throughout the city. This district to date has primarily been funded by the five big tourism draws voluntarily. It's limited our ability to market and maintain professional staff. We have reorganized by adding all the CEOs from those organizations to the board, formed an independent 501c6, done a retail analysis with the Alliance for Economic Development, showing the need for hotels and restaurants, and we are acting on that and working with Councilman Pettis and others who have brought some intriguing prospects to us. We're negotiating with ODOT currently on replacing all of the directional signage on the highways, both sides. Some of it is quite old, and they agree and are going to work with us to replace all of that. We're perfectly positioned with my employer, the Chickasaw Nation's Adventure Road campaign, by being the Adventure District that sits at the very end of it, and we'll be seeing more about that to piggyback on their efforts. And in our attendance, we're working on these figures, but it's easily in excess of $5 million a year for the district. We think it's actually quite a bit more than that, potentially more than double that. At the bid, this one's a different one, and this one we really want to commend the city planning staff and what they have done to help us. Kim and Aubrey have dealt with some things that they were not prepared to deal with, because we have more land that the city owns in this bid than all other bids combined, and it just changes things pretty dramatically. We had petitions signed by over 52% of the non-city property holders. If you include the cities, that's 87% that we have who signed in favor of this without a single person dissenting. The good news for the city is almost everything that you have can be passed through, and the people who, the zoo and Remington and others, are all more than happy to pay their share and would have been glad to sign. We expanded the boundaries southwards 236 to make sure we took in the golf course, the Firefighters, 45th, Spring Lake campus of Metrotech, to make a stronger connection with the developments going on MLK Boulevard, and to maintain something we're very proud of, very strong ties with the neighborhood. We don't want to be an island in the middle and not take note of what's going on around us, so we work very closely with the neighbors as well. Our primary focus in this bid will be on marketing and economic development. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
I do want to thank you, Deborah, and also the people involved with the Adventure District for being good neighbors and reaching out to the different neighborhood associations that surround the Adventure District. You all have went far and beyond, and it is definitely appreciated because the community feels a part of it. So again, I just want to commend you and Tiffany for taking the lead, including the different neighborhood associations and having public meetings and community meetings in reference to this particular bid. Not only did they do a series of community meetings, but they also did several tours of the Adventure District. So again, I just want to thank you all for going the extra mile.
Thank you. It's very important to us. So thank you.
Any comments or questions for Devery or the Business Improvement District? All right. Thanks, Devery.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here hoping to speak on this item today, item 9I? All right. We have a motion and a second. This is to approve the petitions to set up the new bid. Cast your votes, and it passes unanimously. Item 9J is a salary continuation for a police officer, and this meets our criteria. I just need a motion. We do not need executive session. Cast your votes. It passes unanimously. Item 9K, I understand we do not need executive session on this item as well.
That's correct.
All right. Cast your votes. Passes 8-1. And item 9L is a resolution. I understand we do not need executive session.
Do not.
All right. Is there a motion on 9L? Cast your votes. It passes unanimously. Item 9M is another lawsuit. I understand we do not need executive session, so a motion to pass would be in order. Cast your votes. It passes unanimously. And same story with item 9N. We do not need executive session on this item. Is there a motion? All right, cast your votes. And 9N passes unanimously. On 9O, we do need executive session for an update on the water issues. So how about a motion on 9O? All right, cast your votes. That item moves to executive session. Item 9P, understand we do need executive session to discuss our ongoing negotiations with our labor unions.
Yes, sir.
All right, how about a motion to move 9P to executive session? Cast your votes. It passes unanimously. Item 9Q is claims recommended for denial. We have one person who has signed up to speak. I'll ask if any others have shown up here today to speak on this item. Now's the time. Kathy Alcouri. Good morning, Kathy.
Good morning.
Good morning. We will need your name and address for the record, please.
Okay, my name is Kathy Alcouri. My address 10325 East Lake Drive, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma.
Okay. And your claim is for just over $1,000. Can you give us some of the details on this?
Sure. My English is not so good, so bear with me, please. I have a house for sale. I put it for sale last year on December 14, and I changed the carpet so to make it look good for the buyer. So this year I had a buyer for the house, and the buyer went to do inspection on the house, so I had to turn on the utility, the water, the electricity, and all that. So when the water company sent employee to turn on the water, they didn't make sure there's no leaking or anything in the house, but there was leaking in the house, and they damaged the carpet, and I had to replace the carpet so the house will be good for
Right, so you had some localized flooding inside your house?
Yes, and I have proof of everything about the price of the carpet for last year and this year, and the picture of the damage.
Okay.
So,
now, I'm not questioning the damage, and at this point I'm not questioning the price. Let me get some information from our city staff on the city's liability and our ability to pay if we chose. Can someone come forward and kind of, state law provides some guidelines on what municipalities can do when they are deemed to potentially be held responsible. And let's find out from our legal counsel what the council's options are. Tina?
Hi. We checked on this. On June 5th, we went out, read the meter, turned the water on, observed that 8 meters ran through the meter, 8 gallons ran through the meter, and then the water stopped. That's the normal procedure that's done all the time. That also indicates that water is no longer running through the meter and into the house. And then we left. I don't know what happened after that, but the water
So we were turning the water on? Is that what we were doing?
at their request, yes.
I see. Okay. Tina, as far as state law goes, is this one of those options where the council does have the discretion to pay the claim if they chose, or does state law kind of restrict the city's ability to pay?
There's no indication that there was anything negligent done by city employees, and there's no evidence to the contrary, really.
Right.
So I would say, no, we do not have discretion to pay that.
Well, did you request that the water be turned on?
Yes, and I have a picture from my cell phone about the time I called the city, the water company, to shut
Well,
down.
how would you have preferred we turn the water on? I mean, you requested that we turn the water on, and we turn the water on.
Yeah, I requested for them to turn the water on, so the buyer will do the inspection on the house and make sure everything is okay and working, the
Yeah.
plumbing and everything. So when they turned the water on, they didn't make sure there's no leaking.
Yeah. You know, I don't know that the city can make sure that there's not going to be any leaking inside your house. It seems to me like it'd be really hard for the city to determine whether or not that there's a potential leak. If you've requested the water to be turned on, it sounds like, from the city's perspective, that the homeowner expects that there to be leak-free.
Yeah, but it's showing on the meter when they turn the water on. It's showing if it's running or not.
Yeah. You know, I'm trying to find some angle here where we might have some discretion to pay you. I'm not seeing it. Anybody else on council have any opinions to the contrary or any questions they want to ask? Yeah, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to help you. Sorry for your trouble, though. Is there anyone else here to speak on claims recommended for denial? All right, how about a motion then on item 9Q? Cast your votes. It passes unanimously. Item 10A is claims recommended for approval. Is there anyone here hoping to speak on any item listed under 10A? All right, how about a motion then for claims recommended for approval? Is there a second? All right, cast your votes, and it passes unanimously. Item 11 is items from council, and we start with an item that Councilman Pettis has brought up. This is a public hearing today. Is there anyone here hoping to speak in the public hearing aspect of item 11A? All right, we will be moving this forward then. Is the final hearing set for September 1st, Francis? Anyone on council want to speak on this item before we go forward?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. If I could, could you, I guess just walk me through the timeline of how this process works. I mean, how the decision is made to cite someone, how that, just the timeline, the process.
The timeline for the ordinance to, when it passes, or?
No, to take action against a property owner. Let's start with the decision to initiate an action. How is that decision made?
An action against the property owner for a violation of the proposed amendment to the ordinance?
Yes.
The first thing that has to happen after OCPD goes out to check the complaint that is called in to the police is that notice has to be given before a citation is issued to the property owner or the property manager under both the criminal ordinance for disorderly house and for the criminal activities nuisance abatement ordinance, which is a civil procedure. So either the criminal or the civil ordinances actually already exist that would require prior notice be given to the property owner. So once prior notice is given, and that has to be written notice, to the property owner, then a discussion generally occurs with the ordinances we currently have with the nuisance abatement unit in the police department. So far, we've only had one case that's actually had to go over to district court. Generally, property owners in the nuisance abatement unit talk about the kinds of security actions that need to be taken out of the property. And so far, the owners have done that of various properties, and there hasn't been a need to go forward on any except the first one, which ultimately negotiated out, and the owner took security actions too before that case came to an end. So that's generally it. If for some reason the property owner wouldn't take the actions that were requested, then we could proceed with prosecuting a citation for disorderly house, or if the city manager determined that a nuisance action should be taken under the criminal activities nuisance abatement ordinance, then we could proceed on that.
Is it in the ordinance itself, is it stipulated what would trigger being cited, and then is there language that would explain to the property owner how they would remedy the situation? Or is it just up to city staff to tell the property owner what to do, and up to city staff whether they feel that it rises to the level that we need to give a written citation?
The type of activities that could cause a citation to be issued or an action brought are, yes, they are detailed in the ordinance. In fact, most of them are already in the ordinance, but for disorderly house, those currently apply to the inside of the structure.
Right.
So the proposed amendment simply extends those criminal activities to the parking lot, the surrounding area of a disorderly house. For the criminal activity nuisance abatement unit, all of those laws currently exist, but for the open lot disturbance, again, we're talking a parking lot, it adds drug-related activity and prostitution-related activity, which already applies inside the structures. This, again, just is the outside. So there's a laundry list in the ordinance that already exists, mostly for violent crimes that occur at the property. Now this, on the outside, would add the drug-related and prostitution-related. As far as what the owner can do, the owner can certainly take actions on his or her own behalf. They don't have to wait for instruction from the nuisance abatement unit. The nuisance abatement unit is there to try to work with them and figure out a workable solution.
What about possession? Because in our definition, we've stricken possession. It says the sale, distribution, possession, which is stricken through, or use of any controlled dangerous substance, the sale, distribution, possession, or use of which is declared unlawful by state statute. So it seems contradictory, and I guess...
It's still unlawful for a person to possess illegal drugs, but again, because these ordinances are written about the property owner or the property manager, a possession of a drug, if you've got it in your pocket or something, we can't expect a property owner to know about that. So we're talking about getting it out, using it, selling it, distributing it, things that a property owner should be able to see and address.
So would we expect this to be applied to all property owners evenly? Let me give you an example. You have an individual who's taken it upon himself to document prostitution-related activity in parking lots. He has a website. He now apparently is using drones to document this activity. And so you've got a whole thread on OKC Talk, so you've got documented evidence of all this parking lot activity. So would we expect with that kind of documentation that we would then implement to all property owners in which prostitution-related activity has been documented?
I'd have to defer to Chief City on enforcement activity.
Yeah, the documentation we'd have to follow up on. I mean, we would actually, that person would present that information and evidence to our investigators, and we'd follow up on that. Just having pictures of that doesn't automatically make it where charges could be filed. It wouldn't necessarily be enough evidence. So we have to follow up on that, and that's occurred before without the drones, where that evidence is documented, and we follow up on that and possibly file charges on that. So yes, in a parking lot area, if it's continuous activity, we might or probably would notify the owner, let him know that there's activity like that going on. We may make suggestions about providing lighting. But if it's like, for instance, if it's in the parking lot of a church and they're not aware of all that and it's happening periodically, we don't go after the church. I mean, it's one of those things where you have to have some reasonableness in doing, in following up on that nuisance law. So if it's a club that has strict control over that parking lot, they should be providing security, lighting, those types of things. If it's a business, if it's like a truck stop we've had previously and it's ongoing and is allowing prostitution to occur, it's obvious, they know it's occurring. We've cited them numerous times and advised them of that, and they failed to put up extra lighting or add security to monitor that or try to prevent that, then yes, we would probably follow up at some point. But the issue here is that they've received a number of citations, and that we're trying to work with the owner, make notification that they need to do something about it before that nuisance is actually pursued. That's why so few of them haven't been pursued, because there's usually voluntary compliance. People want to try to keep the criminal activity, even clubs, out of their parking area.
So you'd have numerous warnings, numerous conversations before you'd pursue criminal.
Not necessarily warnings, but there may be numerous citations. Yeah, I mean, it's not like you get one citation and we'll start nuisance. I mean, that wouldn't work anyway. You couldn't get that type of proceeding through district court, one citation. But if you had a pattern of that, and it's more than, and you've advised them, we actually give them written notification that this is going on your property. Whether it's a truck stop or whether it's a club or whatever, we make that notification. Then our nuisance abatement unit actually goes out and talks to them and tells them what they can do. They'll look at their property, tell them what they can do to help alleviate some of those problems, or what we think they can do to alleviate some of those problems. And most of the time, we want voluntary compliance. We don't want to have to pursue something in court. And in most cases they will, but we'll work with them to do that. And it usually takes a number of citations before any type of nuisance abatement action would probably take place.
So with it being such a really drawn-out process, and the fact that we passed a similar ordinance in October, we didn't pass it with an emergency. Here there's an emergency being requested from the police departments. Do you require an emergency to be?
No, I think, in this case, if we had the emergency, we could start enforcing it immediately. We haven't had this law, so I don't think it's a life or death circumstance where if we don't have the emergency that, I can't make an argument necessarily for the emergency at this point in that ordinance.
Okay. Well, and we've had this, my concern as I look through the country, because it does look like there's litigation proliferating through the country and cities throughout the country on these kind of nuisance abatement laws, and the ACLU's gotten involved in many cases, much of that because of domestic violence, and clearly this domestic violence has been excluded. But one unforeseen consequence is that people would be afraid to report crime, and domestic violence has been at the forefront of that nationally. But for example, a rape, I would hope that this would not discourage anyone from reporting rape or anything, or any other crime, because they were concerned about repercussions. But the problem that cities have gotten into, it would appear to me, just from my preliminary reading, is because of vagueness and arbitrariness. And here, it does seem like the decision of whether to go against or cite one property owner or another is strictly up to staff. And then the decision of how they would remedy it is not delineated in the ordinance. It's not clear to me how a property owner would know what they needed to do, how much lighting they would need, how much security patrols they might need. It doesn't appear to me that there's anything that the property owner could look to in the ordinance and get guidance as to how they would remedy the situation, which would make it arbitrary and up to staff. The city would be telling businesses how you should and should not secure your parking lot with no guidance.
Actually, the ordinance does have guidance in it, it's just not found in this amendment. It pre-exists, and it sets out certain remedies that the city can seek at district court. And so those same remedies under that umbrella would be what the Criminal Nuisance Activities Abatement Unit would talk to the owner about. Now, you know, if security measures is in that laundry list of items, and it talks about, you know, lighting or security guards, that sort of thing, of course you can't have specifics in the ordinance because it's going to depend on each type of property that you're talking about. But yes, there is a general umbrella provision that sets out several remedies, and I'm sorry I don't have it in front of me, but I certainly can send that to you, Councilman.
I appreciate it.
And also, I would add to that that when you take the nuisance abatement action to district court, it's ultimately up to the judge to decide, based on the evidence that each side presents, what the best remedy for this is. So the judge would actually, we'd be asking for relief from the judge, and the judge would form the remedy.
Okay. If someone wanted to challenge this constitutionally, what impact would declaring an emergency have, if any?
None.
What impact would declaring an emergency have on any action, on any appeal, district court, municipal court?
It would just be, they could go out immediately and begin issuing citations on that the same day it's passed, whereas if it's not an emergency, it's published the day after passage, and then it's effective 30 days after publication. So it's just a 30-day delay on enforcement.
So it wouldn't deprive anyone of their ability to appeal like some of our zoning cases?
No.
Okay.
There's no stay.
No, the only thing it does, the emergency does do, is that it prevents the city from enforcing it during that 30-day period. And if a person wanted to file an action to request a stay of the enforcement of it, they'd have 30 days within which to get it. If they could convince a judge to do it, they'd have 30 days to stay the action. I mean, they could ask for that as part of their petition to the court.
If you pass it with the emergency and Chief City goes out later today and issues a citation based on this ordinance, then the person the citation's issued to could potentially try to get a stay of that.
So what is the reason for the emergency?
After visiting with Chief City, also Assistant City Manager, this amendment was actually brought to, the need was brought to me by the lieutenant of the vice unit. And in his recommendation, we did talk about the emergency, which I did and I still do believe there is an emergency.
Okay.
So
who was that?
I don't know if Chief?
Yeah, it's the lieutenant that's over vice.
Okay.
Vice unit.
Well, we're not voting on the emergency today, but I understand the discussion about the emergency. And that'll be on September 1st if we move forward, Francis? Okay.
I have another question about it if you're finished. From the perspective of a number of years being here, there used to be a club that was operated in a neighborhood, and it was in the northeast part of town. But the house was kind of the place where they sold the beverages, and then Dixie cups in the backyard. And we were always told that it was difficult to try to enforce that outside activity. The gentleman used to come down here, always wore interesting T-shirts and had other ideas that he wanted to promote when he was here, but it was a regular, and it was going on back in the 80s when I was here before. And it's happened since then, hadn't happened recently, but we were always told, or at least my recollection is, we were always told there was a hole somewhere in the ordinance, or we had a constitutional problem, because that was a situation where a business literally operated in the neighborhood, and then that it would get out of hand in the neighborhood, and we would arrest people, maybe, I don't remember, but he always came down, and we never were quite able, at least I didn't feel like we were able to get our arms completely around the problem. And I always thought there was some reason we couldn't. Now, that was a little different situation in that applied, that situation was a guy had a business, and this was on the property owned by the business, so it was all one thing. It seems to me this will apply just to vacant property. Whether there was a business operating on it or not, it would apply. So it's a little different, but would it permit, this ordinance, would it help the kind of problems that we have in these, where there's a business, or would it make any difference? It just occurred to me while I was listening to all this, I have vivid recollections of that guy being here. He used to come, every time he got busted, he'd come talk to us.
Yes, Councilman, well, you were here before I was, so I don't know all the problems that existed in the 80s, but there has been a lot of litigation regarding property owners being held responsible for the criminal acts of third parties in the last several decades.
Right.
And there are certain well-settled areas of law now on what the property owners can be held responsible for. And so we're confident that the amendments that are drafted here absolutely fall soundly within our constitutional parameters.
But don't take anything I said as being opposed to it. I think this is a good idea.
Right.
But I still have the memory of the guy being here.
Should address the holes that existed before.
The microphone was on this end of the council the last time I saw him, so.
So it would apply to vacant property. I mean, if something was happening on a vacant commercial property, that owner would still be responsible for that parking lot.
If it's being used as a disorderly house, or it falls in the bar and tavern setting under the criminal activities nuisance abatement ordinance.
But what if you just had drug-related criminal activity or prostitution-related activity in a vacant commercial parking lot?
If all the appropriate evidence existed, then it should be a disorderly house. And yes, notice would have to be given to the property owner, all of the procedures set out to hold that property owner liable.
And the options for remedy are in the previous ordinance that you're going to forward to me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Cindy, thanks.
Yes.
All right, is there a motion to move this forward? All right, cast your votes. It passes unanimously, and on September 1st, it'll be for a final vote. Still on items from council. Mark, you have anything for us today?
Sorry. Only to send out my condolences, my heartfelt condolences to Debbie Martin and the loss of her husband.
Same here, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thanks, John.
And again, this has been a really tough week or two for Debbie, and so we're going to express our greatest sympathy to she and her family.
David?
I'd like to do the same, Your Honor, and then also extend my appreciation to Doug Cupper, Director of Parks, Ray Thompson, Ward 5 Parks Commissioner, and Dan Langford, the Director of the Early Wine Golf Course, for their assistance yesterday in a ceremony honoring J.W. Mashburn for his many years of service to Oklahoma City and the state of Oklahoma. He first ran in the Olympics as a freshman in college. I believe he was a freshman that first Olympics, and then came back in 1956 and ran again. One of the few Olympic gold medal winners from Oklahoma outside of wrestling and gymnastics that we have. And just all of his efforts in South Oklahoma City. So it was a great ceremony, and appreciate the Parks Department for their assistance with that ceremony. Thank you.
I'd like to echo the concerns about Debbie. I mean, she's so important to the way this council functions, and I know all our hearts and thoughts are with her. About J.W. Mashburn, I tell you, one of the things about him that I've always admired is what a quiet leader he really is. He's not somebody that's waving a flag all the time about what he's accomplished. He's just out there doing things, and he has been that way. You know, he's one of the few people that lettered in sports at both OU and OSU. Olympic gold medalist, very successful home builder, a lot of things he's been very involved in, but he's never out there leading the parade. He's always pushing it, and we don't have a lot of leaders like that are willing to not take credit for it and make sure it gets accomplished. So I never have figured out why I went to the dark side after a year at OU, but I guess, people have personality quirks you just can't explain sometimes. With regard to the discussion we just had about the disorderly house, it seems to me that one of the other things we ought to think about, for years we used to hear about the problems at the zoo amphitheater, and a lot of work was done by the people that operated the amphitheater with the neighborhoods and helped a little bit. It helped a little bit with regard to the parking, but it didn't help much with regard to the sound. And eventually, and that problem is still probably going on. We had a situation in Ward 6, just right across from the boundary line in Ward 4, where we issued permits for people to have outdoor concerts on the river, which at the time we did it appeared to be a reasonable place to do it. There was a lot of buffer, empty space around it, but it didn't take but about the second concert for it to break loose with regard to the noise problems. Well, we had the same thing at Crossroads Mall this weekend. Well, I think I got 7 phone calls and a couple or 3 emails. They had a concert, started in the daytime, started about 3 o'clock, but it didn't wind up till 11 o'clock, and some of the complaints I get say it went all night, which tells you about what time those people go to bed, but apparently they did quit at 7 o'clock, but apparently it was very noisy, very, very disruptive to neighborhoods that I wouldn't have thought could have even heard it, because they're on the opposite side of the interstate. But I don't doubt they did, because I got enough phone calls from them. Somehow we've got to figure out a better way to handle that. I think those events are important. I mean, they generate revenue. People, they wouldn't be wanting to have them if they weren't an economic activity. But we've got to figure out some way. Maybe that we've got to stop them earlier or something.
People on the west side of the interstate were distracted by the noise
And like I said, if it had been one person, I'd have probably said, oh, come on.
That surprises me.
But it wasn't. I mean, it was like, I think I got 7 phone calls, and 5 of the phone calls were from west of the interstate.
They've had some huge crowds out there. It's been very successful, but yeah.
And
I'm not aware of the problems.
I'm not trying to kill that kind of activity, because I do think you don't have a big crowd if you don't have a lot of people wanting to do it, but I just think somehow or other we've got to find a way to be more sensitive to the neighborhoods that, this was on a Saturday night, you'd think.
The pictures I've seen, I seem like it was on even the east side of the mall parking lot.
Well, I didn't hear it.
Yeah.
All I can tell you is I have to, literally the first one I got, I was crisp in my response because they were complaining about the kind of music it was, and I thought, here we go, we got one of those people complaints. But then after it went on, after I got the second one or the third one and the fourth one, and they were all west of the interstate, and everybody wasn't talking, they were talking about noise. They were, I don't have an answer, but these problems are kind of alike. The fire problem we had on that apartment. The real problem with that fire is the impact it has on the people that live around it. The problem that John's talking about, that Vice came up with from the real problem is not really so much what goes on right there, although that's bad. It's the impact it has on people around it. Well, this is the same. This concert thing is the same kind of thing, and the neighborhoods that are to the west of Crossroads are fragile, and I don't have a solution, but we've got to somehow look into it. We can't just let it. Anyway, that's it.
Larry?
I'd just like to pass on condolences to Debbie and to her family, to her grandkids. She was extremely close to her grandkids, and Mike was also, and so there's going to be a tremendous loss there. And thank you to the staff, Jim, for the way they've pitched in to keep the ship afloat during these challenging times for Debbie. So, thank you, Your Honor.
Ed? Just would echo that. I mean, the combination, I think she's up to 42 years, maybe. The combination of that institutional memory and that work ethic is really priceless for the people of Oklahoma City. So my thoughts and prayers are with her. I just mentioned an opportunity. There's a meeting in Dallas on October 25th to the 28th. It's called Railvolution. And I've been to it twice in other cities, but the fact that it's within driving range, I really just would hope to put it on city staff's radar, our radar, the citizens. It's really an unbelievable meeting for 3-4 days. Despite the title, it's not just about rail. It's about transit. It's about placemaking, walkability, the things, Meg, the studies you've been citing, David, the ideas you've been talking, lots of stuff about bicycling, how to changes in the city. I think it would be an unbelievable education for those interested in those kind of things for Oklahoma City. There's congresspersons there, there's experts from around the country, there's great seminars, there's great exhibit halls. I don't think that, as we get ready to bring a streetcar online and possibly a regional transit authority and things like that, we don't have a lot of experts. I'm not saying we don't have any experts. I'm just saying we don't have a lot of experts in streetcar and regional transit and stuff like that. And I just think it would be a great opportunity for the city. So I'm just mentioning that. October 25th to the 28th in Dallas.
Let me comment on that a little bit. Regional transit is probably closer than we all think. It is something that every ACOG meeting there's a discussion about it. And the leadership of Midwest City, Del City, Edmond, Norman are all there. And they're very enthusiastic about it, which is something that we know 2 or 3 years ago we would never believe that they would all be pushing us. It would be us pushing that. It's changed. I mean, there is real interest and enthusiasm, and I think a readiness to open the billfold, which is, without that, enthusiasm doesn't mean a lot, but it's closer than we think.
Well, and we can regret maybe that we're a little bit slower than other cities, but we can also take advantage of learning from what's worked and hasn't worked in other regional transit arrangements and in other cities and other. Generally, there is a regional transit. It's not generally a city just trying to do it by itself. So there's lots and lots of experience and things to learn. And all that will be packed in a bunch of stuff on October 25th to the 28th in Dallas.
Ed, I was going to say, especially in Dallas, because there's so much resistance to the idea of a rail going into North Dallas, Plano, in that area. And it's turned out to be quite successful despite a lot of skepticism.
I agree that the discussion is often tailored to the city that it's in. So the fact that it's in Dallas, a lot of those discussions are going to apply to Oklahoma City with the streetcar and stuff in Dallas.
And Pete, when you say ACOG is always is consistently thinking about regional transportation, you're specifically talking about rail and not some other means of regional transportation, right?
Light rail, probably.
Yeah.
But also bus rapid transit is a big discussion at ACOG on the Northwest Corridor study, and there's a lot of conversation about multimodal regional transit.
I mean, the mayor is the chairman of that committee that is an ACOG-driven committee, and I'm sure he would agree with me that the enthusiasm for the whole idea of regional transportation, I mean, it does include, I mean, we get stuff about bicycles, all kinds, I mean, everything. But the primary focus is light rail between Norman and Edmond and Midwest City. That's primarily the focus of it. But that's not to say that's the entire focus. I mean, it's a pretty impressive array of people, and when you see that they represent all the people that would be necessary to make it work, all sitting there at the table, all enthusiastic, it's at a level probably that the public doesn't recognize at this point, I think. That was my point. it's much closer in terms of the leadership of the communities. Moore, Norman, Oklahoma City, Midwest City, Del City, Edmond, the leadership of all those cities is enthusiastic about it. So it's just it's going to be something we need to really think about when we talk about what we're going to do if we do another maps. It may be something we think about when we talk about bonds. I mean, just we need to be looking for opportunities to lead the way, I think, because it's going to be, it's coming, I think.
Jim, have we signed the MOU with the other cities yet?
It's getting close. I know we were commenting, we agreed to the final words last week. So I don't think we've officially, no, I know we haven't officially signed it yet, but we're, I think, done with the negotiations.
I thought I had seen a chain of emails that said that all the language had been agreed upon. I just didn't know whether or not we formally signed it yet. But we're ready?
I think we're ready.
Good.
All right. James.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention my condolences for Debbie and her family as well. Clearly, we all love Debbie, and our thoughts and prayers are for her.
Thanks. City manager reports.
Thank you, Mayor. We're going to start out this morning with an update on pothole repairs. Eric Winger's here to talk about that, obviously, in light of the citizen survey and, of course, in light of the weather over the last few months. We've been putting a lot of effort on this. But
Thank you, Mr. City Manager and Mayor and Council. We do have a pothole repair update for you today, and I think as we start to talk about potholes, it's obviously something that plagues most cities and something that was also in Oklahoma, especially the months of May and June were tremendous weather events when we talk about the amount of rain that was received. On a normal year in Oklahoma City, we repair about 80,000 potholes, 621 square miles. We use about 13 crews on average to do those pothole repairs. As we start talking about pothole reporting, we talk about our city's action center at 297-2535. We talk about also the new C-Click Fix app that's been debuted last year. And so a lot of these requests and things that I'm going to show you came through those two avenues. We also take emails and just phone calls as well. But in this next slide, we try to fill those potholes as a part of our Leading for Results measures within 3 days of reporting. That is something that we look for an 80% goal in doing. But again, as potholes plague us through the severe rains, it also is snow and ice and just other severe weather events. Probably the big fact that I'm going to show you here is from May 7th to July 21st, we actually filled 30,000 potholes in Oklahoma City. So 80,000 for the year, and in those 10 weeks, we actually filled 30,000 following all the significant rains. This is just the calendars of May and June, just to kind of remind everybody. We had 23 of 31 days in May with rain. It was also a record month of 19 total inches fell in Oklahoma. On June, it was also a very wet month with almost 6 inches of rain on 7 days, and this is really what caused all those 30,000 potholes to appear so quickly. This is a map of Oklahoma City, and we actually record each of these through our work order system, but this shows you the pothole requests that came in, and it was city-wide. It wasn't just in one area. So the rains that fell on Oklahoma City, I expected to see a map maybe that I would show you this morning that showed maybe more potholes in South Oklahoma City where we saw some higher intensity rains, but really it was citywide, and so this is just for information. So the number of requests, so as we look at the May calendar, and what you see here is each of these bars represents about 2 weeks of time. 1st of May to mid-May, mid-May to end of May, and you can see we go into June and July. This is the number of requests. So soon after the rains began in May, you'll see that the requests were about 700 requests. We saw them fall slightly, but then you'll see the significant spike that we saw in the number of requests once those rains subsided with the major events. But then you see them tail back off again as we followed out through the completion of the rain event. This is actually the repair totals, and again, they follow significantly the rain. One of the challenges that we had with the repairs is that you can't repair in the wet weather. It's really impossible to make a pothole patch while it's still raining. So we were really limited on the amount of work that we could actually do with so few working days in the month of May. But you'll see as the rains again started to subside, you'll see that the number of repairs significantly increased to nearly 12,000 repairs just in a 2-week period in the month of June. And then this is the LFR measure that I mentioned. We were tracking just under 60% at the early part of May. You're going to see that we fell almost down to 30%. This is 30% of potholes filled within 3 days. It was just nearly impossible for us to get out and keep up with that work while it was still raining. But you're going to see in just a 6-week period, and I'll credit our crews, our street superintendent, Randy Mulder. They chose to work weekends. They chose to work overtime. We actually increased our number of regular crews from 13 to 18 and 19 crews, and they basically worked nearly round the clock to make sure that we got our LFR measures back up to 80% in just about a 6-week period. So they were committed on that and getting that done. A typical repair process, and I think that we've probably seen some of these, but I just kind of show these as just a general reminder. A pothole repair isn't just throwing some black rocks in the bottom of a hole and hoping that it stays. I mean, it really is a more scientific process. There's actually the cleaning of the hole and making sure we get all the loose material out that you see in the left-hand side of the picture here. On the right-hand side, they're actually spraying what we call a tack. It's kind of like a primer for that patch to actually stick down into that hole. This next process, they obviously lay the actual asphalt material down into the hole. Moving on, then they spread that, next slide, uniformly across the hole. And then there's actually a rolling process in this final slide where they compact it down into that hole and make that permanent repair. We do get complaints sometimes that the patches sometimes don't hold, and unfortunately, when we're patching in somewhat of the wetter weather, those patches do re-release, but we do try to get back out as quickly as we can to get those replaced. Public safety is obviously our #1 goal in making sure that we avoid any type of traffic hazards that might exist on our city streets. So just as a summary, we obviously had very significant rains in May and June. We did work weekends and overtime to make sure that we got caught back up and were able to complete nearly 30,000 repairs in about a 6-week period. We're back on our normal working schedule now. We're back at an 80% level and repairing potholes in 3 days. And with that, I can answer any questions that you might have.
I'd like to compliment you on what's happened over this last 2 or 3 months. I recognize how bad the situation was, but I've got a couple of situations that have just been chronic over the last 4 or 5 years. And during that same time when you guys were really strapped, the kind of repairs that were made on a couple of them were above just the patch. I mean, they fixed the situation that was creating the patch. Even in the middle of all this, it's like, trying to do it in a hailstorm, but there's a couple of places where I think they probably looked at the records or something and said, we've been out here 55 times and we've got to fix this, and where they did pretty substantial, the county was involved in it, and they did some pretty substantial repairs. And I took that as a really good sign of recognizing that sometimes just filling them is not the answer. We've got to figure out why we're filling them. And
I appreciate that. And the reason I showed that map is we do track locations, and there are a number of streets where we're starting to see repeat calls. And in those cases, we're preparing work orders that are not just patching, where we actually call it a base repair. We go and do a section of street and actually remove a portion of a lane. It could be for quite a length, and repair it as a permanent repair. So we're starting to get back into that mode of operation as well.
We had a similar situation, Pete, at 7th and Robinson. That was just a gigantic sinkhole caused by rain going underneath some pipes, and they did a fabulous job. You can't even tell that it was there, Eric.
Thank you.
Really nice job.
Eric, good. I was just going to say thank you for showing the map, because it helps dispel the incorrect perception that some citizens have that only certain parts of the city are addressed when we have these types of problems. And as you identified, it was citywide as far as the problems and the attention that was being given. And I'm sure, from Ward 5 perspective, everyone thinks, well, everybody else but Ward 5 is being taken care of. But this helps demonstrate the severity of the problem that we faced this year and how widespread it was. So thank you.
Eric, is concrete an option, or is that...
So concrete, when we have a crack in a concrete street, and concrete streets don't typically pothole like an asphalt street does, but typically we replace same material with same material. Concrete and asphalt expand and shrink at different rates. Typically patching, say, asphalt into concrete if we have an emergency repair, that's sometimes done, but ultimately on a concrete street we like to go back with concrete as a permanent repair. But patching patching concrete into asphalt is not a traditional patch method. They're not compatible products when we start talking about heat and temperature swings. with that.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions? Eric, we know you guys have been strapped. Thanks for helping us out. All right.
Under item B, Matt Boggs is here from the Treasurer's Office to talk to us for a few minutes about our revenue enforcement efforts.
Okay, thank you. I'm the Assistant Treasurer and Program Manager for the Revenue Enforcement Program. Just want to take some time to update you on our performance in 2015. Fiscal year 2015. Anytime we talk about this program, we like to look back at the history of the success it has had. Since it was implemented in 2001, we've seen $21.5 million in additional taxes collected. Now, we had some pretty aggressive targets set for fiscal year 2015. We didn't quite hit that, but what we'll do is talk, there were some specific reasons in some of the components why we were there. The first component I'd like to cover is our sales tax compliance leads. Treasury staff looks pretty closely every single month at sales tax, but twice a year we take a detailed look at every single taxpayer that's remitting sales and use tax in Oklahoma City. And so what we look for is gaps in payments and certain anomalies. This year our staff sent out about 225 compliance leads to the Oklahoma Tax Commission. What that yielded was an additional $304,000 in sales tax. Now, that number is down from what we've seen in prior years, and the biggest reason for that is the Oklahoma Tax Commission has had a focused effort on delinquent taxpayers. And through doing that, what we've noticed is the number that we see has gone down when we do our review. Getting some numbers from the Tax Commission, they've collected an additional $1 million in sales tax on our behalf. So that is sales tax that we get, it's just not reported in this program, so I thought that was worth noting. Next is our independent audit program. That's where we have engaged a couple of independent audit firms to go look at various sales and use tax remitters in Oklahoma City. During fiscal year 2015, they completed 19 audits on our behalf. That yielded around $145,000. What's important to note there, the direct cost for those auditors was about $24,000. And so that gives us a $6 to 1 ratio, or another way to phrase that, for every dollar we're spending in the independent audit program, we're getting $6 back in collected sales tax. And so we'd like to see that continue. One of the interesting components that we have in our program is the boundary review. And it's exactly what it sounds like. The Tax Commission provides us with a file of all the taxpayers that are in the boundary areas around Oklahoma City, where Oklahoma City and some other municipalities. And what we do is we're able to look at that and see and make sure that they're remitting to Oklahoma City. We do find instances where they're remitting to Oklahoma City and they shouldn't be, but for the most part, in this last fiscal year, we identified 38 times where there were businesses that should have been remitted to Oklahoma City that were remitting to other jurisdictions, and that yielded us around $522,000. That also is down a little bit from some prior years that we've seen. Two main reasons for that. You can imagine that's a complicated data file when we look at that. We requested the Tax Commission give it to us in a little better format, easier for us to use and analyze. Because of that, it pushed back our time frame. We like to do 2 of those reviews a year. During fiscal year 15, we only did 1. In addition to that, the Tax Commission has made an effort to identify some of those on the front end so we don't see that later. So we appreciate those efforts. And finally, we have our hotel corrections. We oversee the hotel tax that comes in for Oklahoma City. And what we do is we look and make sure there are no delinquencies and look at the exemptions that are claimed. Through those efforts, we got an additional $167,000 in hotel tax. So essentially the bottom line is $1.1 million in additional taxes were collected through this program. One of the questions that we get often, well, that's great, but how much does it cost? Our estimated cost for this is around $553,000. So another way to look at that, for every dollar we spend in this program, additional $2 in sales taxes or use taxes or hotel taxes are collected on behalf of the city. We would like to see that number go up going forward, so we've got some new components that we're going to add in this fiscal year, the most exciting of which is our hotel tax audit program, where it's something that's been in the process for the last couple of years. We've developed the program. We've met with different constituents from the Convention and Visitors Bureau to the Hotel Association, and working with the Tax Commission on developing some of our procedures. We have contacted our first auditee that will be audited, and that will kick off probably sometime early to mid-September. With that, I would be happy to take any questions you might have.
Well, if it's an appropriate time, how are we going to deal with Airbnb as it continues to grow?
That is something that we're going to have to continue looking at because, as you know, it's growing and growing, and there are a lot of aspects that come to that, not just from the hotel tax standpoint. So it's something that's a collaborative effort.
Okay. Go ahead.
You go ahead.
Well, it sounds like maybe the city's starting to issue citations on Airbnb.
We have based upon some complaints.
So it's just complaint driven, and what?
We're not proactively going out and doing it. It's almost impossible to do it proactively because they don't give the address on the...
What is what ordinances are they in violation of? Or what?
We can get you a briefing on that.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a question about the internet stuff, but you've answered it. But I have a couple of other things. Who does the audits? Do we have people internally that work for the treasurer's office that do the audits, or would you use?
Now, it depends on what you're talking about. For sales tax audits,
who's the auditor? Is it an employee of the treasurer's office, or?
the only internal employees that we have is for our new hotel tax audit that we're going to start here pretty soon. For the independent audit program, we engage with a third party to do that. And also, when we send out the sales tax compliance issues, the tax commission will send their auditors out, and then we get a report from that.
How does the boundary review thing work? How would you, just give me an overview of how it works? What?
Okay, essentially, so we're going to get the list of all the addresses, and we know which zip codes typically we're going to see that the most in.
Right.
From there, it's a collaborative effort. We work with some of our GIS people here within the city who they can pinpoint, okay, you're in this boundary, you're in this boundary, and then we look and we go from their sales tax files to see, okay, where are they remitting? And like I said, this time 38 times we saw businesses that they were in Oklahoma City limits remitting to another jurisdiction. Right. And we see that at the same time where they should be remitting to another jurisdiction, but they're remitting to us. We just want to make sure it's fair, so we turn all those into the tax commission and they handle it from there.
Well, it seemed to me there'd be certain zip codes that would be, some of them wouldn't make any difference. The whole zip code's in Oklahoma City, but a lot of them around the periphery cover more than one city. More in Oklahoma City overlap a number of places.
Absolutely, and those are the key areas where we see most of the issues are in those boundary areas.
Okay, thank you.
Your Honor, I have a question. Just for clarification, now the sales tax and use tax is collected by the state of Oklahoma.
That's correct.
And then they remit our share to us. But the hotel tax, they do not collect it on our behalf. We have to...
Yes, we collect that ourselves within the city treasurer's office, which is why one of the reasons we felt the hotel tax audit was appropriate, because right now there's no independent verification that we have that what they're reporting is correct. So.
Right. I was just going to say, just based upon some old experience, that's an area that is prime, I think, for some adjustments, because I may be wrong. I think, for example, when the federal government comes in and rents a room, they're exempt from the hotel tax, possibly. And so you've got to look at a lot of information to make sure that the correct amount of tax was calculated by the taxpayer and remitted.
Absolutely, and there are some differences between what we consider exemptions and what the state considers exemptions for sales tax, and some of those issues is kind of the reason why we see things that we have to look at a detailed level.
All right.
I think Laura Johnson wants to talk to for a minute about Airbnb.
I just wanted to respond to Councilman Shadid's interest in the Airbnb situation. So in the enforcement area, we have only issued one citation for an Airbnb facility. That was in Quail Creek. That facility came into compliance, and the citation, I believe, was dismissed. Recently, there have been some complaints about Airbnb operating in Linwood, and we have issued notices, so they have an opportunity to come into compliance. And those are zoning notices, zoning code compliance, not anything to do with the hotel tax. So in order to come into compliance, they'll need to apply for a special permit to operate in a residential area.
And Laura, can you remind me the cost of that permit?
It's $2,700 to apply for that, and it goes before the Planning Commission, and it'll come to the City Council.
Okay.
So that the neighborhood residents have an opportunity to come to the public hearing process.
And that's for R1 zoning?
Yes, that's in R1, R3, ZL and R2, I believe.
So if you wanted to operate an Airbnb, if you wanted to rent out your private property, you need to get the $2,700
Special permit,
special permit.
yes.
How much do you need to be renting out to trigger that?
I believe that if you're renting at all, if you're operating as a commercial hotel enterprise in that area, you're required to apply for the permit, to get a permit before you can continue to operate.
And so Airbnb would qualify as a commercial hotel?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
But you don't have to begin to pay hotel
You do
motel
not.
tax
Our hotel-
until you have until you have two or more
rooms
bedrooms.
qualify you under our hotel ordinance in order to begin remitting the tax, yes.
And as I understand it, you also don't have an issue with the fire marshal until you exceed...
It is my understanding that 5 or more rooms put you into that commercial building code compliance requirement that will require you to come up to fire code, come up to ADA accessibility, have parking. There are all kinds of issues that require that.
So if you were in agricultural zoning, could you operate Airbnb with...
Pop quiz, I got a 75 on the pop quiz. I don't know about agricultural zoning.
I mean, this is extremely complicated for people.
And it's new, so we're still finding our way with it, right.
Just for those people that want to
with
participate in this form of commerce, they ought to really call the city and check to see what the requirements are to ensure that they're not in violation.
Right.
I think is the best advice.
And we have been having some conversations with the city attorney's office, and as soon as we get the language very clearly expressed, we're going to put something on our website so that people can begin to look at that. So our biggest issue right now is that as much as this is growing, the neighborhood opposition to it is growing also, and we get complaints about that.
Now, one option on Airbnb is that you can rent a room in your home while you're still there.
Right.
And so that also would require the 27?
Yes, that makes you a bed and breakfast.
That makes you a bed and even if you don't serve?
Even if you don't serve any breakfast, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I can't, throw a granola bar out there, I guess.
Yeah. So to Meg's point, if somebody wanted to call us, who would they call for questions?
They can call the Development Services Department. They'll give them the information about the zoning issues.
Okay.
All right. So do you have to have a special permit to rent your home?
No, you do not have to have a special permit.
So the distinction is that you're going through the website of B&B.
Well, and it's daily or...
And it's transient rental, where if you're renting out your property, you're doing it for 30 days or more.
Okay.
So
anything
and it is
30 days.
It is an odd distinction because you can have up to 5 unrelated people living in an R1 home, and they can be renting, they can own. That's the definition of residential, 5 or fewer unrelated persons. But once you hit more than that, that's when you come into this need for a special permit. And it's the transient rental piece that makes this a commercial enterprise.
Okay. But, I mean, I'm still getting calls from the nursing home that was placed in the neighborhood. I mean, it seems, so the 5 you can run a commercial business in a R1, you can run a business in a neighborhood.
You can rent to people as long as you have 5 or fewer unrelated persons in one household.
Okay. All right, thanks.
All right. Laura, thanks.
Kenny Sudol here is here to update us on the bond refunding at the fairgrounds.
Good morning. Just want to give you a quick update. Back in June, on June 23rd, the council and the Public Property Authority authorized not to exceed $80 million for the 2015 hotel tax refunding and revenue bonds. And in July of 2015, we, in the middle of July, sold those bonds, very successful We ended up only having to sell $58.3 million worth of bonds. So I know that had been a question that you all had authorized up to $80 million. We were able to get the deal done at only $58.3 million. So there will be no other bonds issued under that authorization from you. We got a true interest cost of 3.43% on those bonds, and as if you'll recall, there are really two purposes to those bonds. One part was to refund about $44 million of the 2005 bonds, the bonds that were first issued after the hotel tax was increased in December of 2004. And on that portion that refunded those old bonds, we were able to save approximately about $6.2 million in today's money, which equates to about a savings of about $500,000 a year. We used then that $500,000 a year plus some additional funds to issue an additional $20 million worth of bonds. So we refunded the old bonds, saved some money, but then used that to partially fund getting $20 million of new bonds for some of the projects we discussed last time, which were some of the paving projects, electrical, roofing upgrades, things like that. So overall, and one other thing we had also talked about that wasn't part of this transaction but was part of the plan was we did take some cash and pay off the 2012 bonds to get rid of those debt service requirements. So overall, where we ended up was, as a result of this, our debt service in 2016 will be about just under $6.5 million, which was just up slightly from just under $6.4 million in fiscal year 15. And the 6/11 portion, the hotel tax is 5.5%. 3% of that is dedicated to the fairgrounds. That portion of the tax generated last year about $7.9 million. So $7.9 million is what's used to pay the bonds. The payments are going to be about 6.5, so there's some room in there, and that additional money will go towards additional cash-funded fairgrounds improvements. So with that, be happy to have answer any questions.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Kenny.
That is all, sir.
All right. Citizens to be heard. We have one person who let us know in advance they were coming. Melvin Latham. Is Melvin here? All right. We have some people that have signed up. I'll ask each of these people to keep their comments at 3 minutes or less. The first is Joe Sarge Nelson.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Morning.
Council. You'll have to forgive me. I have to wear glasses now. How do I look in them? Anyway, y'all have been invited to this big event that's coming up tomorrow morning, or tomorrow at between 1 and 3. History's going to be made and heard, and you folks up there in the Horseshoe naturally are going to miss an event, the ones that cannot come, that began some 200 years ago. And because of what transpired in those years, history can only remember it, because no one will ever be able to repeat it, much less even try. On the second floor of the State's Rotunda, a group of elite people from then to now made history that's recorded in part only in the history books, but all of it was done under this nation's flag. And somewhere in these past few years, we the people have kind of lost sight of what that red, white, and blue with all its stars mean. The resurrection of the American flag should mean more to you than the jobs you now hold or the families you now have, because those will be what those are and appearing on that program have, was, and are wearing this country's uniform, and it's because of what they and thousands of others did, in fact, do today. We are allowed to enjoy these simple things we do every day, no matter what they might be. They are our heroes. One of these guest speakers on that program is the son and heir of just one of the precious few that have even existed back during World War II. He is Mr. Carl Wilburn. He is the son and the heir of the famous fighter pilot and Oklahoman of the Tuskegee Airmen, Lieutenant Arthur Wilburn, who, along with a select few men, you'll have to forgive me here a little bit, I get a little emotional. Combine their skills as fighter pilots that have never been equaled. Even today, with all the aviation's technology, these select few had to actually just fight for the right to fight for this country. And after 150 distinguished flying crosses, 144 air medals, 60 Purple Hearts, and 14 Bronze Stars, and through it all, and even when it was all over, they were still classed as second-class citizens. Time can always change how they were treated, but nothing will ever change what they accomplished. Then we will hear from another group of the famous warriors, those who fooled the country with words, their words. They're the Indian code talkers of World War II. And on the ground, and if in fact you stop and think about it for just a minute, you might realize that the facts will show that these two, one on the ground and those in the air of World War II, would have surely turned out differently if both were not at the very best at what they did. The fighter pilots never lost, and the Indian language was never broken. And all of this was 72 years ago. We as Oklahomans need to understand that the American flag means a great deal. And tomorrow, you're going to miss an event that this city, who is its state's capital, quite a number of people are coming from around the country, I'm told. I was a little shocked about that. We, Channel 44, on News and Friends, are going to be on hand along with all the other nations. But I wanted to invite you all one last time. This is going to be a special event, and you'll never hear these people probably ever speak again. And I do hope you come. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Michael L. Smith.
Hello, everybody. Good morning.
Morning.
Good to be here. All y'all love people here. Well, I have something from the heart I want to say. I'm here at 200 North Walker, is my address where I'm at right now. So, why is cannabis Schedule 1? Schedule 1 salaries are attached. I believe that's why. Why are the city of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, police shooting, killing, while in custody, the unarmed? Police, along with communications protocol, in that capacity, are structured agencies, and not people. It's natural persons is defined in the final rules and regulations, section 31, part 356.2. Why are the city of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, police killing the unarmed? They are not men in the capacity as a natural physical person. That's why. Why are the lost contracts not disclosed in plain writing language, handy and available for the physical public to articulate it on first reading? Since April 2010, and the 20th century particularly, identity enabling acts have failed critical infrastructure again and again. That's why. Why has this city of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and like states, denying the women and men real participation as the decision makers? The process in the rulemaking fails. That's why. And I thank y'all for 3 minutes.
Thanks for coming down. Crystal Yosef.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you all today, Mr.
What is
Mayor.
your name and address for the record?
Sorry, Crystal Yosef, address 7621 Northwest 15th Street. I live in Ward 1. I think we actually went to high school together, if I'm not mistaken. So I, born and raised in Oklahoma City. I moved to D.C. in 2006 after graduating from OU and lived there for 8 years. Recently moved back home to Oklahoma City due to any number of amazing reasons, things that happened 20 years ago with maps being passed and highways being moved and downtown neighborhoods just being revitalized. I came home to visit a couple times. I keep joking that a visit to the Mule, just the grilled cheese there, is what kind of set me over the edge of wanting to move back home. And 6 days later, I gave my 2 weeks notice and decided to move back to Oklahoma City. So I live 7 miles west of the Mule, and I understand that that's not part of MAPS project, which is why I'm here today to kind of speak to an initiative that I believe you guys all heard about 2 weeks ago at the last city council meeting, the MAPS for Neighborhoods initiative. But it's just pretty compelling to me, having lived 7 miles away from what is now the Plaza District and how that was nothing years and years ago, going there and feeling immediately a draw to move back home to be part of whatever is next for this city. So on the one hand, I believe our many thriving districts are quite literally putting us on the map in places I never really knew of growing up here. On the other hand, neighborhoods, though, are where we should be able to be who we are, live comfortably, where we spend time with the people closest to us, and generally connect with the pulse of what matters most. In a continuing conversation with, I know, the 2 folks who spoke here last city council meeting, I'd like to speak to how Ward 1 looks to me with regards to the initiatives or pillars of culture, connectivity, and health. When I say connectivity, I think of ensuring ongoing efforts towards continuous sidewalks. Just recently, I've seen an older gentleman in a wheelchair sitting in Rockwell Avenue waiting for the bus because he couldn't make it up on a ramp. And I know that sidewalks are a current initiative under MAPS 3, if I'm not mistaken. So I know that all these things are ongoing, and it's nothing new to all of you here today. But just wanted to speak to that tone of seeing that driving down the street heading towards I-40 to go to work in Midtown. When I say culture, I think of my high school being right on the edge of a beautiful lake and just coming back and kind of seeing that neighborhood, an area a little far removed from some of the other districts and areas that we see and frequent when our friends are in town and visiting. I feel pretty far removed when I head back home west, and we don't really have access to some of these natural grocery stores and farmers market opportunities and things like that. There's not really a place for that I can tell in our ward right now. I think of a hospital that used to be on 23rd Street where I was a candy striper. It's no longer there. The nearest hospital for us, immediate access to 24-hour health opportunities is about 20 minutes away. So I think of all these things. I have a mother who's 70 years old, and I think about her, spending all this money and time and effort. We've lived in our house for 20 years, and just thinking about how she and other possibly senior citizens in our district maybe feel a little bit slighted and left behind with the way the city has progressed over the past however many years. So just here today to speak a little bit about hoping to get involved in my ward as time goes on, but then also just to kind of consider what opportunities really could lie ahead if we all kind of get together and work towards a MAPS 4 Neighborhoods initiative in the future, if that's possible. Thank you.
Crystal, thanks for coming down.
Larry, I told you that grilled cheese at the Mule was really good.
Benjamin Knuckles.
Good morning, everyone. Mayor, Ms. Sawyer, pleasure to see you. Everyone else, thank you for the opportunity to be here. I, too...
need your name and address for the record.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Benjamin Knuckles, 512 Northwest 18th Street here in Oklahoma City, Ward 6. I, too, am here on behalf of a community-wide initiative that has become known as MAPS for Neighborhoods. A few of us just began a conversation several months ago about not only what we believe to be the need for MAPS 4, but also the importance of perhaps reimagining what MAPS 4 might entail. And I'm sure that you all have much more in-depth conversations than we do at Oak and Orr about such matters. But nevertheless, that's where this conversation began. My guess is that there perhaps is a little bit of MAPS fatigue, or the potential for MAPS fatigue that exists citywide. And I, for one, would like to be an active part of ensuring that quote-unquote MAPS fatigue doesn't take us off track moving forward. But perhaps we could reimagine what Maps 4 might entail to where all of the city, each and every ward, might consider maps to be their maps. And so we believe that perhaps a much more contextualized, neighborhood-based approach might allow for everyone to see their tax dollars put to use in such a way that they could be proud of and also benefit from. So as Crystal has already much more eloquently spoken to than I, the three kind of areas that we're beginning to pay attention to, as she said, are culture. And we believe that you can't necessarily change culture, or maybe better said, that the best way to change culture is to actually create more of it. And so we believe that neighborhood by neighborhood, we ought to actively create and seek to create more and better culture. And again, as she's already mentioned, connectivity, lots of talk about connectivity in the city, and we'd like to see that conversation continued. And then thirdly, health. And when I think of health, I think about much more than just our physical bodies per se, even though that's very important. I think about what does it look like for Oklahoma City and its citizens to flourish in every sense of the word. So I deeply appreciate each and every one of you and the work that you do. I consider this place home by choice, not by circumstance or situation. And there's a growing number of us in this younger generation that want to stand on your shoulders, so to speak, and see to its further success moving forward. So thank you again.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
Thank you for coming, and thanks for the effort of all this. I'm just so proud of your efforts. When you're having discussions with others, are you talking about the next general obligation bond and how that you might have a symbiotic relationship with Maps for Neighborhoods? Because the bond is going to happen. Definitely, Maps, is may or may not happen, but the bond deals with a lot of neighborhood needs like parks, streetscapes, on and on, transit, connectivity, all these kind of things. Is that, if those conversations are going on, great. If they're not, I would encourage you to maybe think about how, because that's maybe $800, $900 million of projects it's the bulk of the city's capital investments in our neighborhoods, and how those two things might form a symbiotic relationship. Because you won't have enough money in the general obligation bond to meet all the neighborhood's needs, and you won't have enough money in Maps to meet all the neighborhood's needs. So how do you mesh those two together, and how do you get the neighborhoods, like you're saying, on the ground level, involved in all those conversations now, because it'll be here before we know it, but probably next year?
Yes, sir. To quickly answer the question, that has been a topic of conversation.
Right.
That perhaps, the timing of the bond and the potential maps and some of those sorts of things, but no. And just to be honest, and my admission is that I feel like I'm on a bit of a steep learning curve as it relates to some of these bond matters and Maps for Force. So I would welcome any input that you might bring to myself and also to the initiative as a whole, for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, Michael Hinton.
Thank you, Your Honor and Council. I'm Michael Hinton of 333 Northwest 5th Street, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma 73102. I come here today to address an issue that's been long overdue, and I happen to have a copy of the agenda, City Council agenda, and this is from Section 9, Section C, and it's regarding texting while driving. I have been through Traverse City many times, and I've observed some situations in which people trying to drive and text on their phones at the same time, not paying attention to traffic. And it's the one that we have not collided with an embarked bus, an 18-wheeler, or a construction vehicle, and let alone hit a pedestrian. I myself just recently was almost a victim of being hit by a pedestrian, which I had to yell at him and say, "Excuse me, sir, the walk sign is on. Pay attention to what you're doing." He just looks at me, "Oh, I'm sorry." I said, "What are you going to do when I'm dead or in the hospital incapacitated for life. He just shrugged his shoulders at me. Well, Your Honor and Counsel, I fully support that fines be implemented against motorists driving their vehicles and not paying attention to traffic and trying to text the phone at the same time. This issue is not addressed. We are looking at a critical element in which the safety and well-being of life, limb, and property is at stake. And I thank you folks for this moment to be heard.
Thanks, Michael. All right, we have executive session. We'll be back.